Hey guys, what's up? It's your boy Shayness, and we have come to the video that you guys have been asking and waiting for, the 4-year of ownership review. So let's jump straight into that. Alright, so before we actually get into the review, I just want to make a few disclaimers, a few notices. First and foremost, my car is modified, so with that being said, I will not actually be going over the modifications that I've done to the car in this video. That'll actually be in the video following next week, where I'm basically going to be reviewing and giving updates on all of the modifications done to the car thus far. In this video, I'm actually just going to go over what it's like from a consumer lens. So from a consumer standpoint, what it's been like to own this car for 4 years, all the maintenance and any of that stuff that I've had to do, and also just my overall experience with the ride quality, the longevity of things. So with that being said, let's go check out the car real quick, and then going into diving into the individual aspects from a consumer standpoint. She doesn't look so bad, right guys? I mean, she cleans up pretty decently. Alright, so the first thing is, and forgive me for the wind noise as always, finally we're getting some nice breezes in California. I haven't really had anything major to complain about the car. So with that being said is the fact that aside from just your standard maintenance, I really haven't had to do anything drastic to the car. No huge changes or anything to be repaired really, but that also probably has to do with the mileage. So embarrassing fact. So the first embarrassing fact that I guess I would state is that that's my mileage right there. So I know some of you guys have probably owned the car thus far, maybe even less than I have, and have probably accumulated a lot more miles than I have. So that's not to say that I don't daily drive this car. I quite literally daily drive this car to work and back. However, my job is probably about a 20-minute drive to and then back, obviously another 20 minutes. So I do a lot of highway driving, which I would personally state probably contributes to my good driving experience, because I don't really do a lot of the stop and go traffic, so I don't have anything major to report in that respect. However, now that we're in here, let's actually just take a look at the rest of the interior just to see how well it's held up. So I really do take care of my cars, and as you can see just by me kind of panning in here, everything stayed in good shape. I mean, even to the point where if you guys follow me long enough, you guys would know that I vinyl wrapped for one of the episodes the ducts for the AC, and even these things, and even the vinyl wrap itself, which I'm not happy with, but that's actually kind of withstood the test of time. Even when you park, like I said, under like heat or something like that, it hasn't really had any issues. Aside from your typical dirtiness, I mean, really there's nothing bad to state. And right now the car looks pretty clean. So fast forwarding even to the seats, again, this is after 4 years of ownership. There's no kind of wear or tear as of yet, and like I said, I do get into this car almost daily. Another thing to note is that a lot of times, especially for us bigger folks, we usually tend to like lean in on here, so that's the only side that you'll actually see a little bit of wear, is literally where you get in and out. So as you can see, there's a little bit of indentation, I guess. So you can see these kinds, they're not cracks, they're just kind of indents, I guess, as of now, as opposed to the rest of the seat. So that's probably really the only thing to gripe about. I was also concerned at the original ownership of this little thing kind of damaging itself, but this thing also has had no issues whatsoever. No problems with the steering wheel itself kind of getting Well, again, the steering wheel is leather, so no problems with this starting to like chafe or just start disintegrating like on some older cars. I know modern cars don't really have this problem, but also to note, the dashboard has no cracks or anything like that. So again, just minor scuffs here when you get out of the door. Oh, you might not be able to see it there so much. Let's go to the other side. So I'm not sure because, oh, there we go. So aside from just your typical scuffs of shoes kind of hitting this door panel on your way out, there's really nothing to note on a negative sense. The rear seats that rarely get any action at all, if ever. And also keep in mind, because I have the R spec, I do have the red interior, so if there was any kind of staining going on or whatnot, I feel like it would be a lot more obvious, and on the red it would probably look nastier. The black usually is easier to clean out. The trunk itself, I let it down to obviously rest my things on it, but and a view of the interior from the back. And so this is where my first complaint again manifests, and it is to do with the paint. So I don't know if you could tell, we just recently washed this, but you see how there's orange peel already happening. So again, forgive me for touching it, it looks dirty, but this should be a very close to perfect reflection. And you can see again it's orange peeled. So I know I've touched base on this on another video for those of you guys that follow me along, but there's that. But let's go forward. About a few years ago, I got into this little accident where this fender suffered damage, but this fender had to be repainted. So look at the reflection on this, and you can see that there's clearly no orange peel going on with the paint. But then let's just go back over here, and you can kind of see, well, I see it clearly, but you see those palm trees, how defragmented they are, how the reflection just doesn't sit well. And then there you go, see, there's the orange peel, a little more obvious up here. And then again, going back to the repainted fender, and you have clear reflection. You can see the trees, and again, no orange peel, because this was repainted, and the people who thankfully I took the car to did an amazing and superior job in their paint as opposed to the factory. So that's my first kind of nuance, I guess you could say, my first complaint. And if you plan on owning or having ownership of one of these cars in the long run, I almost kind of question the longevity of the paint quality. So for those of you guys interested, again, you can keep it as is and not really care. You can maybe invest a little bit in paint correction, which is kind of a expensive maintenance, I guess you could say, or you can go the extreme route and get the vehicle repainted or vinyl wrap. Now to my second complaint, and I know you're gonna say, hey, you have aftermarket wheels. This actually has nothing to do with the wheels, it has to do with the stock tires. So for those of you guys that weren't on my journey for the longest time, I put on these aftermarket wheels almost shortly after owning the car, probably within the first year. However, I did make the tire shop swap out the original tires to these wheels, because obviously the stock tires were brand new. I didn't have but maybe 4,000 miles on the car, so I wanted to obviously use up the tires. You saw my mileage, I'm at 25,000, give or take. Oh, obviously give a little bit more. I know this is supposed to be a wannabe sporty compact car. That's how Hyundai advertises it in a sense, especially now with the N model. But these tires were completely subpar, just really bad from the get-go. I mean, they were okay for consumer tires, but from a sporty standpoint, you would be very disappointed. Now though, now that I'm at 25,000 miles, even though they still clearly have tread, so they're still obviously in good shape, I do start noticing the lack of performance in the tires. So again, I'm barely at 25,000 miles on these things. They should still have a good amount of mileage left on them. But for example, on the freeway or anywhere where I kind of start having spirited driving, I do start noticing the lack of grip. It's a lot more evident now than it was when I originally had these tires when they were a little newer. So that's a little concerning. Again, I know that they're not the best, but the fact that I'm already kind of experiencing that and I only have 25,000 miles. So again, nothing major, nothing that's going to cause any kind of major issue, because again, tires are replaceable. But that's another gripe from a consumer lens. Now the brakes, they're pretty good for what they are. I mean, again, if you're a sportier person, you have a little bit of extra money to spend or splurge, then you'll probably eventually upgrade brakes, maybe even your rotors. No complaints there really from a consumer lens. From an enthusiast, you'd probably want to upgrade them eventually. So come to the front end, no complaints on any kind of damage or wear. If anything, I mean, like I said, I drive on the freeway a lot, and I would have expected a little bit more issues with like rock chippings and things like that. Again, nothing to report. I've actually been very lucky with that. So yeah, it's holding up pretty well. Also, a common complaint about these is bumper sag, and as you can see, I don't have any. And I have had to remove my bumper a few times for modifications. So take that for what you will. This is a 2016 model, now 4 years older, and I do obviously take off the bumper for certain installs and things, and I don't experience bumper sag. So there's that. Under the hood, whoa, that is nasty and dirty. I had not seen that. Forgive me. I just washed the car, but that's not something I did. So we're under the hood, and this probably looks a little different from your average stock hood because we have an aftermarket intake and oil catch cans. But the reason why we're under here is this guy right here, the windshield wiper reservoir tank. Plain and simple, it seems to have died on me. Actually, it probably died on me earlier this year. So again, at that point, would have had the car for 3 years, and the windshield wiper fluid motor just took a crap on me. For me, because I'm not leveraging it by years, I'm leveraging it by the fact that this car has 25,000 miles on it. That's extremely disappointing. That's probably my biggest complaint, aside from another story which I'll tell you towards the end. But also the fact that that motor is not under warranty for whatever reason. Doesn't matter on the mileage, doesn't matter on the years, or apparently I guess they'll do it if it goes out in the first year. So yeah, that's kind of annoying, just because as little of a thing as that is, sometimes you need, windshield wiper fluid to clean out your windshield, when there's debris or whatnot. So that's extremely frustrating. So that's kind of my major complaint that I have so far with the ownership of this vehicle 4 years down the line. I know I said I wasn't going to touch base on modifications, but now that we're under the hood, feel free to watch one of my other videos. But this type of car, whether it's a turbo model or not, any GDI, gasoline direct injection, any type of vehicle that has direct injection of some sort, I would highly recommend oil catch cans. I'm not going to go into it in this video, but again, if that's something that you're just wondering, even if you're 50,000 miles in of ownership, 60,000 miles, I would still recommend going back and getting one. Again, for the price, just one of those top priority things. Other than that, nothing else really. Oh, I guess a minor complaint is, so you could see the headlight is back here in this dark abyss. I don't know if you can see it well here. Let's see. Oh, right there. So that's the tiniest of space. If you have big hands, like most men do, good luck on trying to replace your headlight bulb if it ever goes out. You quite literally, and that's my first experience on removing the bumper. You don't have to remove the bumper per se, but you'll have to at the very least detach this portion right here, because there's a bolt like right underneath right here directly that you have to remove in order to take off this headlight assembly. The other one being, because it's not closed, this bolt right here where the red washer is, I don't know if you can see that or not. And the other one being right under here, that one. So as far as easily accessible things that you could technically do yourself without having to take your car to the dealership, if you're not a hands-on person, that's probably something that you're gonna have to end up taking your car to the dealership to replace. Again, this is from a consumer lens. For those of us that are into cars, you know, snapping off that bumper a little bit might not be the biggest deal, but if you've never done that before, and I'll tell you this from personal experience, the first time I had to do that freaked me out, because I swear I thought I was going to break the bumper or the clips. And won't lie, that's actually a possibility if you're too harsh on them, breaking the clips, which are right here. Fortunately, they're replaceable, but if you do that, unfortunately, that's an extra expense that has to come out of your pocket just to replace the headlights. So take that for what you will. Just another little, again, consumer tidbit, that if you have to replace the actual headlight, it's going to be a pain. The high beam, which is here, not so much, and turn signals are really easy as well. Even, which I have amber deletes, which is basically this vinyl skin covering this. There's a orange reflector for us in the US. For, I believe, KDM market, it's white. But the bulb to get to that is actually very easily as well. It's pretty accessible. It's like right there. All right, and now we're towards the back, and the only reason why is because I want it to be in a little bit of shade. But suspension, so I'm lowered, and that's kind of the biggest thing I need to state right out, you know, get it out of the way, is I am on lowering springs, not coilovers. So the rest of the suspension is stock aside from the springs. And again, I've been lowered almost since the beginning. I did lower it, I want to say in the first year, maybe a little bit over that, but the stock suspension has actually held up very well. Again, these particular springs that I'm on aren't the most aggressive drop, but they are obviously aftermarket and not the purpose distance or spring size. So the one thing that I do want to state is that the actual shock absorbers have done a phenomenal job, both front and rear, considering the fact that I know 25,000 miles isn't a lot, but 4 years time just constantly being at this type of level has not worn them out or killed them, so to speak, yet. So I have had no issues or any need to replace those particular shock absorbers. And I've also haven't had any negative experience so far with anything else like bushings, though I know for those of you guys that are aware about car modifications is the fact that since we have lowered the car, that will be something that I'll have to consider eventually and obviously look into, because things wear out naturally, even more so with the fact that we're not at a stock ride height anymore. So again, take that for what you will. If that's something that was kind of a gripe on a previous vehicle, just know that these particular things have done very well on this car. I guess just some minor things before I get into my biggest complaint, because it's kind of a story, is since I was complaining about the headlights, the taillights are actually, well, if you have a Veloster Turbo, the stop and just normal taillights are LEDs already built in, so you'll never have to worry about that. Downside is, though, if you're familiar with LED taillights or headlights, is that if a bulb dies, it is not replaceable, so you will have to replace this whole assembly. If you have a non-turbo model, they use a standard bulb, so you'll be able to easily replace. Quite literally just remove this, and then just pull out the whole taillight assembly. And then you can easily access the turn signal and the reverse bulb that's in there. On my car there, they've been replaced with LEDs, and then obviously the stock LED for the stop, for the brake. Other gripes that I've heard other owners, besides the interior, which I already touched base, is having issues with the AC unit and the stereo unit. I have not had any problems with either, so I'm just getting that out of the way if you've wondered that. I've also had no issues with the latch button, which is underneath right there, or with the backup camera, which I believe came standard after the 2014 model turbos. Could be wrong. I know some of the first gen ones didn't have it. So I believe it was the later half of the 2014 models. And finally, since we're talking about model years, if you are planning on modifying a Veloster, that's your main interest, and you're watching this video because of that, you've probably seen, if you've done any research, to avoid the 2013 models. Only reason being is the 2013 turbo models were basically the first turbo Veloster models introduced, and so Hyundai was obviously very excited to roll out a new product, but as you may well know, new products aren't always without their quirks and downsides. So there was a lot of issues with improper spark plug heat ranges, just improper tuning, lots of weaker internals, things of that nature for a turbo vehicle, which for some caused reliability issues, all the way to having their engines just blow up on them. So if you are planning on buying a turbo model, even from a consumer standpoint, because it is hit or miss, I might suggest avoiding the 2013 models and at the very least going with the 2014 model. The only other thing to mention on the 2014 models, or anything under a 2016, is that in 2016 they did a refresh where they changed your gauge cluster to look like mine, where, here I'll turn on the key so you can see what I mean. Oh, but they upgraded the gauge cluster to this more sporty kind of analog system. The traditional one that was on prior to 2016 models looked more Hyundai-ish. The gauges were blue and the temperature and fuel gauge were actually in the center digitally, and there was like a little Veloster symbol down the center. It didn't look like this. So if you do look at one of those vehicles, you're going to notice that major difference. Also, depending on if you get a tech package or not, this stereo and AC system will be different. On the tech packages or the ultimate versions, you know, the fully loaded models, you have automatic AC and a built-in navigation system, where in 2016, at least the second half, they were upgradable to Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. But again, keep in mind, you had to have the tech package navigation, and that was only for 2016 models on up. And there was a cutoff, so I have heard some 2016 owners that got their cars a little early weren't able to do that. I apologize. That was also a free upgrade before. If you buy one of those vehicles and that upgrade was not done by the previous owner, you might have to pay, I believe it's like $100 or $125 for the file, because if you see down here, there's a USB port. You're able to do that on your own. So yeah. Alright guys, so forgive me for the headband, but my hair has just grown ridiculously. So this is the story that I was mentioning, and quite possibly from a consumer lens, my biggest complaint. So this is embarrassing. I haven't really touched base on this, but I did mention earlier that I got into a little accident when I was mentioning the paint issue. And so for full transparency, I would like to say that I'm almost only 20% to blame on that. And the reason being is that at work, my particular parking lot at work has a slight decline or incline, whatever you'd like to call it. So I would typically park towards the top of that in reverse. I don't know, that was just the way I would do it, just so I could have the cars back towards where the sun would normally rise. And so I would always park it there for the longest time. Every single day I would just park, until that dreaded day that I'm mentioning, where the 20% fault being is that when I would park it, obviously you're supposed to point your wheels towards the inside of a curb, just to be safe. And so I did not do that. Only reason being is because this particular decline was just so light that never in a million years did I think that a brand new 2016 car that was only 2 years old at the time, with probably a little over 10,000 miles, would have an issue with the parking brake. And so what ended up happening is I parked there like normal, and I would get to work early. I'd get there like around 8:30, and around 11:30 the parking brake completely just failed. I wouldn't say completely. It failed to the point where it just wasn't holding the car anymore. My car, being in neutral, again my fault, ended up just rolling down and hitting another car, causing my fender to bend, my bumper to have a small amount of damage, and my headlight on that side to crack. Nothing major. Fortunately, the other car just had a little bit of bumper damage, but again, nobody was hurt. Fortunately, nobody was in the way, nobody was around, and it was just one parked car. When I went to the dealership, they said that that wasn't their fault, that essentially they only warranty that particular part for a year max, again. And when they checked it out, they're like, well, the handbrake's okay, it could use a little bit of tightening, but in order for us to do that, we would have to charge you because of labor. So, of course, I was pretty annoyed, aggravated, upset, angry, all the negative emotions you could think of. I was furious because obviously I had to pay out of pocket for damages. I honestly went through insurance, but of course till this day that's affected me a little negatively with my insurance for something that I personally believe should have never happened to begin with the brand new vehicle. Their response was to basically pull on the handbrake higher than normal. I don't know, I guess they want me to yank it like I'm about to break the darn thing. So that's probably my biggest complaint with owning this vehicle. Again, I'm almost positive that I'm one of the very unlucky few. If you do a little research, I did find an article that stated that this was actually something that happened to 2014 models with weaker handbrakes or handbrake issues. Supposedly it was resolved for later models, but again, I don't know, I must have just been unlucky. So take that for what you will. That's probably the biggest gripe. But to wrap things up, aside from that, I'm honestly very happy with the vehicle. The tires are not really a major deal. Obviously that's something that's going to get replaced eventually anyways. The paint is a little bit more of a nuance because realistically when you buy a brand new car, you expect it to have a decent paint job. But that's not the end all, because coming from somebody who owns an Acura and multiple Honda vehicles, some of you guys will know that the prior models in like the 2000s had horrible paint jobs. Even though the paint itself wasn't orange peeling like this one is, the paint deteriorated and was eaten up very quickly, the clear coat. So again, we'll see how long this one lasts, but that's just obviously something I wanted to mention. The other stuff, which again could be minor annoyances for those of you guys that like to work on your vehicles, like replacing the headlights. Again, I'm not one person that would be excited to have to almost remove the bumper just to be able to replace the headlights. Again, some of you guys with smaller hands might get away with being able to fit and do it on your own, but that is something to note because some of you guys just probably wouldn't want to go through all that hassle and might have to actually pay the dealership to replace something that's arguably like 10 bucks. So, but this is my 4-year consumer review of owning the car, how I feel about the car 4 years later. Again, if you are considering one, they are pretty great for the price, especially if you're buying one used, because unfortunately they depreciated insanely fast. You would probably get a good deal. Honestly, for the price that you pay, all of those issues that I mentioned might not be deal breakers. Number two, if you plan on buying one for the sake of modifying it, two things. I would honestly steer away from the nav, or aka the naturally aspirated model, and I would just at the very least get a turbo model. You'll notice it's a night and day difference. I'm not bashing on any of you followers that have a naturally aspirated Veloster, because obviously cosmetically you could do the exact same things, but more from a driving standard, you're gonna notice the lack of power, you're gonna be a little bored, and you're not gonna have as many options to tinker with at least trying to get a bump up in power unless you have the turbo model. So again, if you're looking at it from that angle, I would definitely strive to get a turbo model. And lastly, try to get one that's at least a 2014 or up. Personally, because I do like the updates that they made on the 2016 models, I would tell you to get a 2016 model at the very least on up. And that's of course if you're looking for Gen 1. If you're looking for Gen 2, which obviously this is not, make sure to go check one out because it's a love-hate relationship for the Veloster community. You either prefer the first gen, you prefer the second, and there's a very few who actually like both. So that's just what I've seen. But as always, guys, hopefully this video was educational, informative. Hopefully I helped you out if you were on the edge about buying one of these or considering it. It still gets my seal of approval. I still recommend it, again, especially for what you're probably going to pay for one. Just be mindful to do your research. Do not get ripped off, because people get ripped off every which way, no matter what the car is. As always, thank you guys for all the love and support, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.